Alrighty, we are going to do some scene work now. I've spent a lot of time talking about structure and theories and hacks, but what does that actually look like in practice? I mean, I could say here, you outline and you got 35 scenes in your screenplay, but at some point you have to get down to the act of writing the scenes themselves one by one. And the easier way to do this instead of just talking into the camera is to show it visually what a scene would look like. Now, I do have a video after this where I go through the first 10 pages of a number of my own screenplays so you can see the finished product. But that's the finished, edited, rewritten product. These are going to be raw scenes, like from start to finish, so that it kind of demystifies the process. Like, you can do it. Like, these is how scenes are. One of the things to keep in mind, I mentioned that there's kind of a mini 3-act structure to every scene. Now, depending on how late that writer got into the scene, you may not see all three of those acts in practice, but they're there. It's set up, complications, resolution within the scene. It's kind of like a roller coaster. They start you off level, you go up, and then you come back down. Day to day shit gets real, shit gets resolved. The thing to keep in mind with every single scene is it's important to experiment with getting in at different times. Sometimes you can get away with getting in like right at the end of the scene and then leaving. The important thing though is how late can you get into the scene and how early can you get out of it while still delivering the emotional impact that you want to. Okay? I know I keep bringing up emotions because that's key. Every scene or moment should be trying to stir up emotions from your reader. It doesn't have to be all sappy, huge, big emotional moments. They can be small emotional moments, but you want to go for the emotions because that's how you hook your reader and subsequently your viewer through and carry them through the whole story. Now, there's all kinds of different emotions. Some people always just treat emotions like, drama and sappiness and blah, 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 blah. Awe is an emotion. Wonder, amazement, making someone say, that's so cool, making them say, that's so funny, that's so scary, that's so thrilling, that's so romantic. Just some form of emotion that you want to draw out of them because apathy is a story killer, and apathy and boredom are on the same spectrum. Usually it goes apathy first, and then you get to boredom, and then you might lose your audience. I'm going to say this in a future video because it's really that important that you want to be going after your viewers and readers' emotions. So, when you sit down to write a scene, you should also keep in mind what scenes do people expect to see in this type of genre that you are writing in, and then give them that, but give it to them different, just like but different. Ask yourself, what is the obvious, generic, bland way for this scene to play out, the most obvious way? And then ask yourself, what are 3 or 4 different unique ways that with your distinct voice, you can give them a different experience than what they are coming in to expect. The other example, though, is sometimes you can't think of a way to make it super distinct, and in which case you still give it to them, but you just make the scene really, really short, so they still get that crucial portion of your story. So I'm going to go with the kind of universal things in a lot of scripts. You see breakup scenes, for example. In all types of different screenplays, there's been hundreds of variations of the breakup scene. And so I'll give you like the super generic first drafty version, and then we're gonna toy with it with some twists, come in at different points, so you can see what I'm talking about. So I am just gonna rough draft, put a sweater on because it's about to get really first drafty in here, right? Because I'm doing it on the fly. It's gonna be a breakup scene. Character is gonna be Bob and Jane. For example, Bob's going to come home from work, and then Jane is going to have a surprise for him. So let's do, by the way, I'm going to be doing this on the computer here, but most of the time I do this in my head through pre-visualization, but as it turns out, pre-visualization does not make for good videos and definitely not for good live streams. So I'm just going to do it this way, but you should kind of be doing this in your head. Otherwise, you're going to write a bunch of stuff and then have even more rewriting and editing to do. Okay, so it's Bob and Jane, blah, blah, blah. Okay, interior. They can live in an apartment. It could be a house. Doesn't matter. We'll go with interior, house. Go with apartment. Interior, apartment, night. All right. We'll go put living room, because a lot of times in an apartment the entryway goes right into the living room, as opposed to a house where you usually have like a foyer or a full entryway, right? So super generic version. Bob, he'll already be introduced, so you don't have to capitalize the name. Bob opens the front door to the apartment and enters. He calls out to his, we'll make her a girlfriend instead of wife. He calls out to his girlfriend, Jane. Honey, ham. Bob steps forward. Bob steps forward and sees Jane sitting on their couch. Jane will say, "How's it going?" Oh, hi. So there's a lot of things that happen at the beginning of these kind of generic scenes. It's like, oh, hey, how you doing? How was your day? Blah blah blah. How was work? Most of the time, unless it's super distinct, it's just gonna get cut. I'm gonna write that kind of stuff out in this scene because we're doing the super generic version. But just so you know, hi. I'm so glad to be home. How was your day? Not great. Why? What's going on? And then Jane says, why don't you sit down? We need to talk. Everyone knows that we need to talk. So here's where you can also deviate like immediately in this scene. You can do, I don't see a lot of writers doing this, but they absolutely can. We need to talk. So you know that there's going to be this huge collection of words and sentences leading up to the moment where she starts talking about how they got to break up. All right. Sometimes you can kind of fast forward that, right? So you go to like exterior, apartment, building, night, the moon shines bright in the sky, and then you cut right back in, apartment, living room, night. Bob and Jane are sitting on the couch. Bob looks like he's had the wind knocked out of him. And then you could tell that shit has already gone down, right? Just by his expression. And then Bob would. So whenever you do this kind of a cut away and then cut back, because you've cut out a huge portion of the conversation that you're not going to show the audience, you want in the first sentence or two to get them caught up, because otherwise they may get confused. So just give them a quick recap, like be like, I can't believe this. You're breaking up with me. Okay. And then you could take the scene from there. You know, she'd be like, I wish there was another way, you know, and then they would carry on the scene, right? So you can do that kind of trick sometimes. And then you don't have to have like a page and a half of them going back and forth because you're still getting to the point, okay? But let's stick with our original track that I was on. As you can tell, I get very tangential from time to time. Okay, so why don't you sit down? We need to talk. And then he says, why? What's happening here? Um, she would say, "Can you please just sit down?" And then he would say something like, "Not until you tell me what's going on." Tell me if this is familiar, because it's very, very familiar to me. I'm trying to write the super basic version of it, right? And then she just comes out with it, and then she says, "There's no easy way to say this, so I guess I'll just come out with it." By the way, you can have her take Jane exhales. It's there. Um, okay, so I'll just come out with it. And then Bob can gulp, right? Bob gulps. Uh oh. Uh oh. Spaghettios. No. Uh oh. Um. Uh. It's just not working between us. He says, "What do you mean?" All right. So, even in a super generic version of this, there are like 8 different versions of reasons. So there is, what for reason 1 would be Bob. You're always at work late. Um, you're married to your job when you should be married to me. Other version of this is, Bob, you wouldn't know romance if it punched you in the dick. All right. Another version of this is, Bob, I know you've been gambling again. Another version of this would be, let me think of one. Bob, let's see what else there is. You've been hitting. You told me you'd stay on the wagon. You can see like we're doing variations. You're gonna have to make a decision like what's wrong with Bob's relationship. Um, uh, Bob, I can only wait so long for a ring. Anyway, so as you can see, there's like 5 or 6 different variations of what is wrong with Bob and Jane's relationship. So you got to kind of pick a lane and just figure it out. You kind of should have figured it out beforehand, honestly, because otherwise you got some big thinking to do. Also, it kind of depends on the plot and the character and what his weakness is. Okay, so let's just say that he's married to his job, right? So get rid of these ones here. Bob, you're always home late. You're married to your job when you should be married to me. And then he's going to freak out and be like, sweetie, I can change. And then she's going to say, it's too little, too late. And then he's going to say something like, it's never too late. I'll talk to my boss. Talk to my boss tomorrow. Um, Trust me, honey, I'll fix this. Um, that she could say, why didn't you think of that a year ago? Um, and then it'll go back and forth some more, but like she could say, she could stop herself and be like, actually, never mind, it doesn't matter now, it's over. Um, and then he could say, please, begging you, don't do this. We're so good together. And then she says, yeah, when we're actually together. Okay? Let me see. Which is practically never. Sorry, sometimes I have to actually stop and think. Is practically never. And then she could move to the door. Jane starts moving toward the door. He'll say something like, "No, don't go." And then she'll be like, "I'm sorry. I wish things turned out differently, but I can't waste any more of my life. I'm already dangerously close to 40." And then Bob in like one last ditch will be like, "Is there really nothing I can do to get you to stay?" And then she'll say, "No." Jane exits the apartment. There's like a little addendum, a postscript epilogue to this kind of scene. Interior apartment, living room, night. Bob looks like he's been run over by a semi truck. And then you just kind of have, this is where there's kind of like a sequel to the scene, but also it's like a little tiny postscript. It's not a full scene. It's gonna be an addendum, an add-on. It's gonna be like 2 lines maybe. Bob looks like he's running over a semi truck. He starts drinking vodka straight from the bottle, and this should actually be in the kitchen. He stands in front of his open fridge and drinks vodka straight from the bottle. He can say something to himself on top of it, to himself, like, fuck. Or, Jesus, effing, anyway, okay. Anyway, any kind of version of, these different things, right? So, because that little extra moment just shows he's expressing his emotions, which will kind of tug at people's heartstrings more, and it gives him a moment of reflection to think that he's super messed up, which will make his character want to do things differently, right? So here is your super generic version of that scene. It usually goes on longer than that, but I'm just ad-libbing it, and I only have so much time because we got other stuff to do in this course. But so you got your beginning, you got your shit getting real, you got your shit getting resolved. Now here's the thing with shit getting resolved within a scene, a lot of the time your character is going to lose. Through scene by scene, your character is going to lose a lot because when they start winning is toward the end of the screenplay. Because if they're winning all the time, they're not earning their victory, right? So there's a lot of mini losses, a lot of major losses along the way. Before they finally achieve their goal. So there's your standard breakup scene. Now, this is where things get interesting because this is the super generic version that people are already expecting and is not super exciting. So you ask yourself, You do have your emotional punch there, but what can I do differently that people aren't expecting? What's my spin I can put on it? What's my author voice version of this that like only I can bring to this? Also, you experiment because you have the full version now of where do I start this scene? Okay, we kind of talked about it a little bit when I did the quick cut to outside and back to, hey, I can't believe this, you're breaking up with me, because you can carry on the rest of the scene there. But first version is, how do I do something differently? So what if Bob opens the apartment door and enters, but here's the alternate version. Enters carrying a bouquet of flowers. Um, he says instead of hi honey, he'd be like, sweetie, do I have a surprise for you? Um, he looks over at Jane, who sits on the couch. She gazes at the flowers that he's holding. All right. Oh shit. Okay. Sweetie, do I have a surprise for you? And then she says, oh, wow. But she's thinking, wow, in the sense, like, uh-oh, it's going to make it harder for me to break up with him. When he's thinking, ooh, yeah, wow, like I really surprised her. So he, because here's the thing with flowers, just in general, if you've been in a relationship, uh, most of the time, guys, in particular, they will give flowers for birthdays or anniversaries or special occasions or when they have super fucked up. Okay? But like no in between. It's very rare that a guy is just going to go out and buy flowers for his girlfriend or wife just because he's thinking about her and it happens to be like a random Wednesday. Okay? So, our old Baba over here actually did that. He was thinking about his girlfriend, wife, whichever we didn't decide which one it was, and he's like, "Oh, maybe I'm gonna get some good sex. Maybe I'm gonna get like butt stuff today. I'm gonna bring her flowers just because on a Wednesday, right? Because he was just thinking about her. Anyway, sweetie, do I have a surprise for you? Oh wow, she says. Bob smiles wide. Because this way, it digs the knife in even deeper. Because he went out and did something really, really nice, and then she ends up breaking up with him, right? So it tugs at your old heartstrings even more. Sweetie, do I have a surprise for you? Oh wow, they're beautiful, aren't they? Although they aren't nearly as beautiful as you are. Um, and then Jane grimaces. You really shouldn't have. Um, and then he will dig it even further and be like, why not? You're worth it. I love you so much. And then Jane sighs and then says, honey, we need to talk. And then you take the scene from there because he's done all this nice stuff and he thinks he's going to get brownie points and all this blah, 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 blah. And then he's about to get punched right in the fucking dick. Okay? So you can do the honey, we need to talk, and then you cut outside and come back in. And then maybe he, like, for example, exterior apartment. Blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to do the whole thing. You know what I'm talking about. Moon. I'm going to shorthand that sucker. Interior apartment. I'm not going to do the whole thing again here. Living room. Bob. Um, as as Bob holds the bouquet, the flowers droop. Um, he has a hang dog look on his face. He could even say something like, "Talk about a punch." You have to get him caught up, right? Talk about a punch to the dick. Um, and then Jane could be like, "I'm so sorry about this," and then he'll be like, "This breakup is really coming out of left field." Okay, and then you keep going from there, right? I spelled field wrong. Sue me. Feel it wrong. All right. So, there's that version, right, with the bouquet of flowers. There's another alternate version. Here's the thing. There's like a million alternate versions, and a lot of the stuff you should be doing in your head, because otherwise you're just rewriting this scene like a million times, right? And you're just losing tons of stuff because it's getting cut, 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 cut. Another version. Bob opens the front door to the apartment. Mud is all over his clothes and even face, for example. And then he says, "You wouldn't believe the fucking day I've had. Literally nothing has gone right." All right. And then, so when Jane grimaces over at you know, it's gonna dig the knife even further. So there's that version there where he comes in with mud all over his face. There's another version you could do. Bob opens the front door to the apartment. He is wearing a firefighter uniform because Jane has a firefighter role play, or he comes in wearing an astronaut costume, right? Be like, and he says the same thing, "Sweetie, do I have a surprise for you? Your firefighter role play dreams are all about to come true. Um, it's about to get red hot in here." All right. And then so it's even going to be crazier because he's going to be wearing a firefighter uniform like the entire scene where he's getting broken up with, right? And then after he gets broken up with, when he's drinking by the fridge, he could be like, uh, talk about a wet noodle hose or something, some dick reference, right? Limp dick reference, after getting broken up with, and then it'll seem like even more of a beat down sad sack after getting broken up with. um, but there's different variations of these scenes. Bob can come in happy, like super super happy, because things went right. He could be like, "I got home early, throw on some lingerie, honey, because we got a whole bunch of extra time tonight." He can come home with a big bottle of wine. All these different versions that we have gone through, and it'll change the entire kind of complexion of the scene. Also, you can change other parts of the scene too, where instead of just saying, "Is there anything I could do?" be like, "You know what? Like, I'm at a random point here, but be like, when he's trying to keep her around, he could be like, "Sweetie, uh, remember that trip to Hawaii you've been talking about for years? Well, guess what? Um, it's time for an early birthday present." Hold on one second while I think of something. Anyway, the point is Bob can do increasingly desperate things to keep her around. Um, there's also a version where he starts blaming her and argues with her and making it her fault. It just depends on the emotion that you are trying to convey. Either way, the scene's always gonna end. Um, with them breaking up. Unless you want to kind of do like some weird fake out, like which would be different too, where she kind of briefly takes him out, like she briefly takes him back and then she kind of slides out in the middle of the night. That's a different version too. But like I said, ask yourself, okay, what is the super bland version of this look like? And then what can I do differently in my own way? These are just like three or four just different options. Like I said, for every scene, there's probably like 20, 50, 100 different ways to convey it. And you can still get the same emotional impact that you were looking for out of it. And you can do it in a way that only you can think of. Like these are ways that I'm thinking of on the fly. Like by the way, this is just super first drafty on the fly. You could be doing this in the outline stage too. You can rewrite it later and come up with some other versions of it and write it. They don't have to break up at home either. Like maybe he takes her on like a super special date. That he made a reservation. Things cost like a lot of money, and then she breaks up with him out in public, which is way worse. I don't know if you've been broken up with in public. It's way worse. But like stuff like that. There's another version of it. I am getting lost in the weeds here. Okay, but back to the beginning. There's another version, like I just thought of, for example, right? Bob opens the front door. Maybe he has the flowers. He still okay. Well, I'll just write flowers. You know, he still has the flowers. He doesn't see Jane. He calls out, "Sweetie, I have an amazing surprise for you." Um, but he receives no response. So then he starts looking. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but like for example, interior, apartment, hallway, night. Bob moves down the hallway looking for his wife, girlfriend, whatever we're calling her these days. Interior, apartment, bedroom, night. Bob enters the bedroom and is shocked to see Jane in bed with, I don't know, hunky personal trainer. A hunky personal trainer named Brock. I don't know. Greg. Whatever we're doing. Greg. You know. So you could do that version where he walks in on her having sex with someone, a guy, a girl, whoever, you know. They could be in the bathroom, having sex in the shower. So there's that version of it. There's another version of it where Bob opens the front door. He is surprised to see moving boxes. Moving like maybe Jane's holding a moving box because maybe he walked in on her when she was just gonna slide out and like Irish goodbye his ass. But he walked in just as she's carrying boxes. Okay, she might have just been too weak to even bother to give him the breakup, right? Or he walks in and there's boxes there. Maybe there's two huge dudes that are her friends. They're gonna help her move, and then the entire breakup takes place in front of these two guys. And the Bob will say like, "Can we talk in private?" And she'd be like, "No, I don't want to talk in private." And then you just have like these two awkward guys like hulking beside her, and then it makes it even more embarrassing that she's airing his dirty laundry. So these are different like versions. Like I said, I'm not saying which one to go with. These are just all ideas, and you could be coming up with ideas for your version of these things, and you feel what's best for your story, right? But anyway, now that it's a total shit show mess over here, once you come up with your distinct idea, you don't have to start either with Bob opening the front door. You can just start. You could cut to the living room. Like I said, So if you think of it, this is the act one of this. This is the act one of the scene, like right here, and then here's like the middle part here, and then where's the end? The end was like here, like down here. So there's act one, act two, and act three, and then mini acts inside that scene. You could start in the middle of act two or start at the act three. So for example, where are we? So instead of starting with Bob opening the front door, you can just cut to the scene. Like Bob is sitting on the couch looking bereft as he holds a bouquet of flowers. Jane is awkward as she sits next to him. And then he could just be like, I can't believe this is happening, or this can't be real. You're really breaking up with me. So, you know what I mean? You can start it like super, super duper late. You can incorporate these new ideas here and then start the scene super duper late. There's also a version. So here's the thing. I don't know what kind of story you're telling, what genre it is. If you just want to convey the emotional gut punch of him getting broken up with, um, you can do the super duper short version, right? The super greasy truck stop short version. This is the quickie truck stop version, where it could be like 2 lines. Bob looks like he's been run over by a truck. Jane is by the door, and then it's just like, I can't believe you broke my heart. I can't believe you broke my heart. And then you cut to the scene where he's at the fridge drinking the vodka out of the bottle, looking, miserable. That's if like depends on your story, because sometimes like in a rom-com you're gonna want to have a full scene. In other kind of stories, like maybe this is a mystery and Bob is a detective, whatever, and it's just to show that he has a terrible personal life, and so you only need like this portion here, like of that scene. It just depends on the story you're trying to tell. Sometimes you can get away with this as long as you give just enough of an emotional gut punch. Other times you need the full scene, but you could have the scene start in the third act. So it's like I said, always try to figure out which is the best way for me to tell this scene. How late can I get in and still get the emotional impact I'm looking for? Let's move on. There's another thing, a different kind of scene. It's actually a sequence, right? So the breakup scene is super common. The next big one that you see a lot is weddings, right? There's weddings in rom-coms, but there's weddings in biographical pictures. There's weddings in all kinds of different things. Horror movies, blah, 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 blah. A million different kinds of weddings. But weddings can be one shot. Weddings can be one scene. Weddings can be a full sequence. Sometimes, here we go. Sometimes with weddings, let me just make some room. Make some room for the old wedding. Sometimes a wedding can be the entire script. There's entire screenplays that just take place at a wedding, right? Actually, I don't know why I did that. Let me go back here. So you look at the beginning, the 3-act structure of a sequence, right? So you can do a 3-act structure of a scene, 3-act structure of a sequence, or the 3-act structure of a whole movie. I'm trying not to be confusing. I'm trying to be very clear on this. Okay, so in general, this is the progression that happens. Get out of here. Get out. I didn't ask for you. The progression of wedding sequence scenes. I'll put sequence up here so it doesn't seem weird. Although it's already weird. Let's be honest. I'm talking to you. Okay. So, you have the exterior at the church. Sometimes you cut to the bridal suite, where there'll be a quick moment where the mother will tell the bride, "Oh, you look beautiful," and then she's like, "Oh yeah, I've been dreaming about this since I'm 5. I've had the wedding dress picked out for like 20 years. I never thought it would happen." Blah 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 blah. Or you go to the bridal suite and it's like, I'm having cold feet. I never thought this would happen. Am I doing the right thing? Sometimes you go over to the groom suite, for example. Same thing. Oh, I'm getting cold feet, jitters. Is this gonna work? Or there could be some kind of drama because the maid of honor had sex with the one of the groomsmen or something like that, right? Then the next part of the sequence that could happen. These are all things that could happen. You go to the congregation area or the nave or whatever it's called, where everyone sits, right? You can have the whole big thing where people are talking, before the ceremony starts. Then you have, the groom at the front with the pastor, and then the organ starts playing, and then the bride starts going down the aisle, and then all of a sudden they're together. They look at each other. The pastor gives their big speech, dearly beloved, they blah blah blah. So and so have gathered here today for wedded matrimony. If you've been to a wedding, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, some of us have been to way too many weddings that haven't lasted. Anyway, some that have do though as well. But anyway, then they get to the point where is there anyone who objects to this wedding, and that's sometimes where you get a lot of drama. If it's like a love triangle or a second chance romance kind of thing. Sometimes they do their own vows, and you can do comedy. Or you can get super sappy emotional with your own vows. You can go either way. Then, the pastor's like, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Love, honor, and cherish. I do, and I do. And then at the end, it's you may kiss the bride, and they kiss, blah, blah, blah. So there's your whole ceremony in a nutshell. And then you have the part where they come out of the church, they're holding hands, they're smiling, they go to like the limo or whatever car they have, and it has just married written on it, and then the car pulls off. And then you can go to the outside of the reception hall or the ballroom or wherever they're holding the old reception. Then there's all the different things. There's the first dance, there's the best man speech, maid of honor speech. They cut the cake, they eat the meal. Then they dance. Then there's the portion where they're all exhausted. They take off their regular shoes and they say goodbye. They go to the hotel room and they start the honeymoon early, so to speak. So that's kind of like a huge sequence. Like I said, it could be 10, 15 pages. It could be the entire 90 pages, this wedding thing, right? So depending on what your story is looking for, sometimes, like in a biographical picture, right, you wanted to denote the passage of time. And the fact that they got wedding is just like a footnote in the whole long story. You could just do literally exterior church day. We'll go with Bob and Jane again. Bob and Jane come out of the church smiling and holding hands. They get into a limo, which is parked on the street. Just married is written on the back of the limo. The car then drives off. So, in some movies, that could be the end of the scene, like right there. Cut to whatever the next scene is. That could be it, like right there. Depends on the kind of movie you're trying to tell. You could make full scenes out of some of these other things. You can pick and choose, for example. Sometimes, also you got to think about budget sometimes. For example, renting out a whole church for a location is costly. And then, depending on how many people Bob and Jane know, you might have to get like 100 extras, to fill up the pews so it doesn't look like they're losers and there's no one there, right? So you might have to get like 100 extras and you're there for the whole day and there's this whole big speech. Sometimes, for the sake of your story, but also sometimes you have to think about budget, right? You can literally do interior church day, but you just say Bob and Jane gaze into each other's eyes. The pastor, they should be pastor or Pastor Bob or whatever. The pastor finishes his talk or whatever it is, pastor says, not pastor, pastor. You may kiss the bride. I almost wrote bridge. You may kiss the bridge. Bob leans in and gives Jane a deep kiss. So like that, for example, the camera could just literally focus on Bob and Jane as they kiss, and you could avoid having a ton of extras, because that's all right there, and you're still getting the core portion, which is that they're married and they love each other and they got vows and love, honor, and cherish, right? Till death do they part, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. Anyway, I went on. But that version of it, they probably wouldn't get extras at all because they would just focus on that, and be done with it. But if you're doing the full thing, and then does anyone object? Obviously there's that, right? Sometimes what you could do, because you're trying to be different, sometimes maybe they have exterior. That's weird. Exterior beach day. Bob and Jane stand in the stand. Sorry, my brain fart. Okay, Bob and Jane have their toes in the sand for their beach wedding. The thing with the beach wedding is you're probably gonna have fewer guests. It's gonna be maybe like 20 or 30 people because you're at a destination kind of thing, right? You could also do kind of like, not a cliff, but you know what I mean, like a very picturesque kind of thing where you only invite super close friends and family, the small wedding type deal. You can also have exterior house, backyard, day. Some budget conscious versions, you just hold the ceremony and the reception at your house, like you do the ceremony in the backyard and you do the reception inside the house. If you have a poorer couple or a more budget friendly couple, you could do the backyard wedding. Also, most of the time in movies, there's a first wedding. If you do a second wedding, a lot of the time you've already done the big shebang, the big, $10,000-$20,000 wedding, and then the second wedding, you're just like, I just want to be married. I don't need the big fanfare. And so a lot of times you get those backyard weddings. They didn't spend a boatload on the dress and all these other things in the catering. It's much smaller, so you could do those backyard. So think about that sometimes, for different options. But think of other places where people could get married. Also, sometimes people do like weird theme weddings, where they're wearing costumes if they're like really into witches or they're really into sci-fi characters. There's like cosplay weddings, things that can be different too. Instead of the traditional kind of slow dance, sometimes they do whatever pop culture dance is popular at the time in a music video, and they do that. You can make up your own dance that they do, for example. Or maybe they're like really in the 1920s and they want to do swing dancing, or stuff like that. You can make your wedding like way different. Also, sometimes you come in really, really late. You can also do a wedding version. I did the thing where they came out of the church smiling at each other. There's another version you could do to denote a wedding. If you want to skip the ceremony, you can skip the entire ceremony and still get the impact that you're looking for. Because, like I said, the church stuff can be really expensive, but also people have seen the church stuff a million times. There's been a million movies about all the church stuff. If you've been to a wedding, you know all the words that have been said. So unless stuff that happens at the church is crucial, like maybe Bob has been unfaithful in the past, and so for him saying the vows is really important for the story. Or like I said, if a maid of honor had sex with the groomsman or the best man, and there's drama. Then the bridal suite and the groom suite, you could have that, or if there's a big objection, stuff like that. But sometimes you can go straight to, let's say that this happens in a ballroom at a hotel instead of a reception hall. It could be any one of those, right? Sometimes you can just skip the entire ceremony itself, go straight to interior hotel ballroom. You can also skip. Talk about starting late. Like we're talking about starting late and doing things different, right? You could skip over 99% of the reception. This is a way to do it and still get some impact. Usually, what happens at the end of a wedding, Bob and Jane sit at a table in the ballroom. Um, Bob wears a wedding tux, but no longer wears his bow tie. Meanwhile, Jane is in her wedding gown, but has changed into um, ballet flats instead of heels, or like for example, she's barefoot. Um, because it's the end, just like that image, it denotes that it's the end of the reception. Because at some point, most grooms will take off the old bow tie and loosen it up, and the bride will get tired of her feet hurting in heels and either put on flats or just go barefoot the rest of the night. Um, there could even be like empty like food plates are beside them with the remnants of wedding cake on them. So you can tell like almost all the stuff's happened. Um, maybe Jane's shoulder. Oh, Jane's head rests on Bob's shoulder. They both get far away looks in their eyes. And they could be something super similar like, what a magical evening. Or I couldn't have dreamt it better than this. So, like that, what is that? 6 lines? Like a quarter of a page. And you could see that they had an awesome wedding that they're super happy with, right? No church stuff, none of that, long speeches or whatever. Just boom, there it is. There's your wedding, and they're happy with it. So that talk about going in late, right there. And as long as they, gaze into each other, maybe it's like they gaze into each other's eyes and then kiss. You still get that warm, fuzzy feeling if you're watching it, right? So that's the thing I'm talking about. Like, you can do all kinds of different things. Like, what can you do that's different? What can you do? Um, what can you do to come in late? Can you still get the impact? Because here's the thing: you're still getting an impact emotionally from this. You're still getting a lot of information from this section. That's only a quarter of a page. But sometimes you want to do like the whole thing. You want to do the whole shebang, so to speak. And that's fine if you make it work and you make it interesting and you make it compelling. Like, I don't know your story. Maybe you're strapped on time. Maybe you only have like a half a page to spare out of your 90 pages. And, you just do it quick, easy, greasy, truck stop style. Um, so it's up to you to decide what's best for your story. Now, here's like a third example, the birds and the bees scene, for example. The classic coming of age, teen sex comedy, just in general thing. So, I don't know if you had a birds and the bees talk with your dad or your mom or whoever, but most of us have. Um, Generally, it goes one or two ways. It's interior house, bedroom, day. We'll get different name. Petey. We'll call him Petey. Petey is jerking off. Um, Door opens and um, Pete's Pete's father, Tom, gets a very unwanted eyeful. Petey covers up, looking like he could die of embarrassment. Okay, and then you usually cut to the next scene, right? Because there's stuff that happens between this and the next scene, but you don't need to show that. Like, you already got your stuff. Alternate version of this. Um, No, I didn't ask for that. Hello, 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 hello. Okay, PD. I'm not going to delete this, but the alternate version is PD is making out with. Who are we going with? Charlene. Charlene on his bed. Door opens, and Pete's father, Tom, gets a very unwanted eyeful. Tom clears his throat and gets PD's attention. Anyway, so, or other version is interior bathroom. Um, Tom comes in, or Tom knocks, be like, "Hey, you've been in the shower for a long time, sport." He comes in, he flushes the toilet, the water goes super cold, and then Petey screams like a little girl, because the water changed on him in the shower. Because you know what was happening in the shower, right? And then you cut to the next scene, and Petey's like got wet hair and blah 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 blah. Okay, so like there's like your three kind of. Someone should tell me I made a typo right there. Come on, help me out here. Follow along. No, so you got multiple versions of this, right? And then you can just cut to. You could do the comedic version. Exterior house day. Um, Beautiful day outside. Birds are chirping. Completely oblivious to what has just gone down inside the Johnson house. And then you cut back in. Interior, house, bedroom, day. See, I've talked about like establishing shots. Like you can cut out and come back in, and you can still make it entertaining, even though it's a quick establishing shot. Establishing shots don't have to be boring. You can use them to your own comedic or emotional advantage sometimes, right? Like you could even have it. Someone could be just like add like for example in like a car is parked on the sidewalk with two teenagers heavy necking or something. Stuff like that. It does. It's still an establishing shot, but shit's going on, right? The teenagers should be capitalized. Hello. There. Okay. So you could do stuff with that. Anyway, you go back in. PD sits on his bed, looking insanely embarrassed. Tom sits next to him. Okay, so we have all kind of experienced this the 3-act version of this. It's let me tell you about the birds and the bees and how the old plumbing works and blah blah blah. And do you have any questions? Do you just want to die right now or do you want to die later? Do you want your head to explode? Anyway, but like good talk, son. It'd be like good talk, son. Right? So I don't need to write this whole scene out because we know what the generic version of this scene looks like, right? Blah blah blah, birds and bees and do 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 do. Be careful, use condoms. Do 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 do. How about this? Have you tried abstaining from sex? Like, have you tried abstaining from sex? There's also like, are you trying to give your poor dad a heart attack? There is. Damn. I wish this day would never come. They never prepare you for this. Variations of that, blah blah blah. PD's gonna be super embarrassed and not want to talk and want it to be over with. He probably has 1.5 million questions. He doesn't want to talk to his fucking dad about it though. That's for damn sure. Stay safe out there, bud. Stay safe out there, bud. Cover up the old Johnny. So anyway, but that's like the version that everyone knows of this. But you can come in super late. Back to like the greasy truck stop quickie version. There is a version of this where it's very long. There's a short version of this. For example, uh, Petey looks like he wants to crawl into a hole. Um, Tom gets hole after what he was just told. Tom gets up from the bed and heads toward the door. So this is the tail end, like the 3-act version of it. The third act, you skip over so much and you go straight to him already being embarrassed. The dad's already given the talk. Be like, do you have any questions? Petey shakes his head. Not daring to say a word, right? Dad's like, all right, good talk then. Tom exits the room. There's going to be a version of this. Let me add on. Let me write it down before. Tom does a fist pump. Nailed it. Score one for Papa Einstein or whatever. Nailed it. Dad joke thing. But Tom exits the room. Get back over here. So sometimes you just gotta write things down before you forget them, right? So anyway, so Petey's gonna mutter to himself. I don't think I'll ever. Maybe you should type better, Kev. I'll ever be able to get another erection. After that, I don't think I'll ever be an erection because the dad traumatized him. So that you can have that, so you get your emotion, out of it, just in this like half a page, and then you have this little tag. Little tags like this are super underrated, especially when you're writing comedies, but they can be underrated because you have this whole scene, and then characters, after a big moment, a big emotional moment, they always have a reaction, but they don't always share it with the other characters in the scene. Sometimes they just need to step away privately. And it could be like, hey, I nailed it. Or it could be, holy fuck, that was a shit show. Or it could be like, yeah, I got to drink straight out of the vodka bottle. But like these things here, like this is like, sorry, this right here is like 2 lines here. But it doesn't add a lot of page count, but it adds like an extra moment, the tag to that scene. It's kind of like if this was an action scene. The hero fights like a henchman and has a hard time, barely survives. You have a little tag where the hero's like, oh, that was fucking close. Or I'm too old for this shit. Stuff like that. It's nice to have that kind of extra thing. So like I said, there is a version of this where you start super, super late. Like I said, always be thinking, how late can I start this scene and still get the emotional response that you're looking for? Whether it's terror or laughter or awe or amazement or thrill, whatever, or just like super drama, or you just want the audience to feel bad for your character. Like you can do it in a compact way without taking up a ton of room. Or if you're able to come up with a really unique idea, you can come up with all different versions. Like for example, there's a version of the full there's a version of the full talk right here, right? Um, where the dad is aggressive. The dad's super aggressive and goes right at his son and tells him, if you get someone pregnant, I'm going to fucking kill you. And it's like scared straight. He just scares the fuck out of his kid, right? There's that distinct version of that, right? There's this super awkward version where the dad doesn't even know how to talk to his son about sex at all. And he's just fumbling along and tripping over his words the whole time. And then maybe the son is the mature one and he's like, Dad, I kind of know how the plumbing works, right? Like the dad is the awkward kind of teenager, and the son is the more adult, like, I know how the plumbing works, Pops. You don't have to tell me. Um, there's the really understanding version, where the dad might be like, I remember when I had this talk with my dad. Holy smokes, what a shit show that was. I'm not gonna be like, I promise, I'm not gonna be like that dad. He's being like that embarrassing dad, but he's like, oh, son, I understand. I'm not gonna like embarrass you. While he's in the process of embarrassing him. Like my dad said, oh, you wouldn't believe the shit that my dad said during the Birds and the Bees talk. Holy fuck, that guy had no self awareness, right? As he is currently having no self awareness. There's another version where you kind of pile it on, right? So usually, if like they're making out, like PD and his girlfriend, I already forgot her name, but PD and his girlfriend Charlene, where like they have Charlene leave, and then the Birds and the Bees talk is just between PD and his dad. But there's another version where the dad is like, I'm going to take it upon myself to talk to both Charlene and PD and make it super awkward. So this version here is, Charlene and PD are getting the the awkward sex talk, right? There's another version here where the dad's like, "Well, if I'm doing this, let's just do it all, right?" So I'll sit down, Charlie and Petey, and then just say Petey has like a younger brother or Petey has a sister, right? And the dad just sits down with Charlene and Petey and like little Kimmy or whatever, or little Bobby or something, and then it's just like a four-person crowded, super awkward like sex talk. Um, like that's the kind of different stuff that you could do. Like I said, always think about what is the bland generic version of this? How can you do something different than what the audience is expecting? How late can you enter the scene? If you can't think of anything different and the scene's not like super super important, please don't omit the scene. Like I said, there's a the third act version where it's like 3 or 4 lines. Still give audience members that scene. Just make it short. Because like in a coming of age movie and stuff like that, you're expecting the scene. If you don't have this scene, the viewer is going to notice and they may not be able to vocalize it, but internally it'll feel missing, right? So, like I said, the most important thing you do, scene by scene, you may have 35 scenes or 40 scenes in your script. Think about what can I do differently? How late can you enter the scene while still getting the emotional impact that you are looking for?